And while we are passing the basket, I've asked a friend to come up and read a vision for you.
Darren, alcoholic. Darren. A vision for you. We have shown how we got out from under. You say, yes, I am willing, but am I to be consigned to a life where I shall be stupid, boring, and glum, like some righteous people I see? I know I must get along without liquor, but how can I? Have you a sufficient substitute? Yes, there is a substitute, and it is vastly more than that. It is a fellowship in Alcoholics Anonymous. There you will find release from care, boredom, and worry. Your imagination will be fired. Life will mean something at last. The most satisfactory years of your existence lie ahead. Thus we find the fellowship, and so will you. How is that to come about, you ask? Where am I to find these people? You're going to meet these new friends in your own community. Near you, alcoholics are dying helplessly like people in a sinking ship. If you live in a large place, there are hundreds. High and low, rich and poor, these are future fellows of Alcoholics Anonymous. Among them, you will make lifelong friends. You will be bound to them. I'm guessing that's supposed to be it, but yeah, with new and wonderful ties. For you will escape disaster together, and you will commence shoulder to shoulder your common journey. Then you will know what it means to give of yourself that others may survive and rediscover life. You will learn the full meaning of love thy neighbor as thyself. It may seem incredible that these men are to become happy, respected, and useful once more. How can they rise out of such misery, bad repute, and hopelessness? The practical answer is that since these things have happened among us, they can happen with you. Should you wish them above all else, and be willing to make use of our experience, we are sure they will come. The age of miracles is still with us. Our own recovery proves that.
Thank you, Darren. All right. And for our Vision for You talk tonight, our speaker is Devin C. from Brooklyn, New York.
I don't know how you did it with the stand. I'm just going to hold the thing. Good evening, everybody. My name is Devin. I am a recovered alcoholic. Hey, Devin. I do live in Brooklyn, New York. I'm not from Brooklyn, New York. I've been there 13 years, though, so I feel like I've got a couple of the New York stripes on my shoulder now. I do have a sobriety date. It's August 28th of 2011, and I have a home group. If you find yourself up in Brooklyn, it's called No Serenity Till Brooklyn. We have 4 meetings a week. We literally get people coming in being like, I love the Beastie Boys, so I came, I came, it was already a group 3 years into the deal, so I had nothing to do with the name. But it does seem to attract, some younger people, which is really good. And it's a great group. We participate in AA, and I really believe that I do have a voice through that group. We have intergroup delegates, we have GSRs, and that's where I get a chance to express my conscience and in AA. So I'm really grateful for that group. They've allowed me to do a ton of service. It's been my home group for about 9 years now, and it's really cool to be in a group for a while. I'm a big fan of actually getting a home group, not just attending a bunch of meetings. You can go to a bunch of meetings, but it's different to have a group. And I've learned a lot about having a group and being able to be there, because typically I know who hasn't been there because I've been there long enough. And I want to thank everybody who's doing service, putting this thing on. I have done a little bit of service on some weekend stuff, and it's just a lot. And it's a lot to get together and plan all this stuff and make sure the thing is here, and then you guys being here is really what it's all about. And so it's really cool that we got a good chunk of people out here, and I know Rayanne was awesome. Thank you. And tomorrow's going to be really great. So please be here for the weekend. And I'm also really glad you had Darren read that, because you can find a recording of me trying to read that at multiple things where I just cry the whole time and I can't get it out, because that part of a vision for you always, it touches something in me. And so I asked Teddy, I said, so you gave me a vision for you. What do you guys want? Do you want me to go through the chapter? And he just said, well, do whatever you want. I said, great. So I have no idea where this is going to go. I'm feeling like it could go a bunch of different ways, so we'll kind of find out. But I want to touch on what was just read really quick. I was in a meeting once, and it was a big book study in the city, and it typically, in my opinion, is like they're on the money. We're like getting it in. And we were reading kind of this part of it where they talked about build the fellowship you crave. And everybody in that meeting talked about walking into an AA meeting and like getting to go bowling and go to the movies and go to the diner and hang out. And isn't fellowship wonderful? And I think that stuff's really great. I think it's super vital and super important. But what Darren read really talks about what the vision for you is all about, which is among those people in the world that have alcoholism that do not know there is an answer. The you in a vision for you is the potential person who just tapped into a source of power greater than yourself, who's actually done this program, who's now woken up and had that aha moment and is like, so now what do I do with this? And they're like, hey, the vision for you is to do what AA really is, which is sit down across the table with another alcoholic and share your experience, And so they talk about you're going to find future fellows of Alcoholics Anonymous, not current fellows of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a little different for me when I read the chapter thinking about this is about how do I go and build the fellowship I crave. One person at a time, sometimes a room full of people at a time, but just trying to carry this message of really how God showed up in my life. I read through this morning because I tend to look at some of these things if I have a topic. I'm like, I feel like I want to at least get my head right in this. And I realize at the beginning of this chapter talks a little bit about the darkness before the dawn, so to speak. And so I want to qualify a little bit of how I came into AA because I think it's super important. Maybe some of you are like me, but if somebody just launches into like a topic or a step, and I don't know if they're really an alcoholic, I have this like really bad attention span, and I just zone out, you know what I mean? So it's like I want to hear someone get drunk first, and then maybe I'm willing to listen to what they have to say. It's just how it works. At 8 years old, so I'll try to do this quickly. Let me do this so I can not get way off the rails and put a timer on. How many people had to get evaluated? I got evaluated at 8 years old. My family got called into the school and they said, we think there's something wrong with him, At 8 years, yeah, hands up, thank you. I got here and I started talking to one of my new buddies here, and I had to go to the restroom. I walked down the hall and I said, God, I need my people. Y'all my people. And I've been really looking forward to this weekend for a while. But so, 8-year-old Devin, had to get evaluated. What that meant was they sent me to some child psychiatrist, and I got, all the tests, and they said I had some letters and that I wasn't going to be able to focus well or pay attention. And I had that hyperactive thing too, so I was going to be off the walls. And what it looked like was I couldn't, I guess, just sit down, shut up, and be quiet as a kid. I had that kind of thing where I would interrupt the other kids, I would interrupt the teachers, I would get up when everyone's supposed to be sitting down, I would walk around, I couldn't just be. And I don't know if that's alcoholism, for those of us that start to look at alcoholism as being way behind the drink. I just know that there was something that wasn't right. But if you're living in that state of reality, you don't really know there's anything else available, right? This is my reality as I've been waking up, this is what life feels like. This is all I know. The first time I took a drink at 12 or 13 years old, I got a completely different vision of what reality could be. For the first time in my life, it was like I had this mirror to realize, man, I've been super uncomfortable in my own skin for as long as I can remember, Alcohol does something to everybody. My wife, I've only seen her get sick once. We went to a wedding. She drank way too many lime gimlets or something. I don't even know what it was. Basil gimlet? I don't know. But the next morning we were going to the airport, and I had to play blocker in the cab line while she puked in the trash can. For her that's a very rare occurrence. She's that's not her relationship to alcohol at all. But if you drink enough alcohol, you're going to be sick. That's what's going to happen. You won't be able to walk in a straight line. You probably shouldn't operate heavy machinery. All that stuff. That happens to everybody. Something that I relate to with a lot of the people I meet in AA is we talk about what alcohol does for us. And what alcohol does for me is it literally was a spiritual experience. It was a transformational experience. All of a sudden, I did have the new pair of glasses, to borrow that idea. I was looking at the world in a different way. I didn't care what you thought about me. You were making fun of me. I could make fun of you. Like I started being able to live and exist in a way that was foreign to how I'd ever been able to show up and approach life up until that moment. And so for me, having a pretty like fireworks, amazing experience of getting drunk that first time, there was no consequences. I mean, I don't remember what happened. I remember very specifically, we grabbed a bottle of gin. We drank as much gin as we could, as fast as we could, because that's what we thought alcohol was for. You drink it as much and as fast as you can, because clearly there's an effect that we're looking for. And when we all felt it, the funny thing is, of all the people that I took that first drink with, we all ended up either sober or really having a lot of problems. I think one of us might have been a hard drinker. I think he's got like 6 kids and lives in Michigan. I think he's doing okay. But my other buddy got sober at like 18, 19, and then I was 24 when I wound up here, suicidal, unable to live in the world, unable to function. It's not a big leap for me to consider, like, if I could find a way to feel comfortable in my own skin, if I can find a way to feel okay, if I have an opportunity to remove all of this chatter and noise in my mind that was just always there, and that was what I thought life was. Being able to quiet my mind, being able to relax my shoulders, to be able to, talk to her, to like do a bunch of stuff that I was physically like incapable of doing. Well, yes, sign me up for that as often as I can do that. I mean, to me, it's like I think everyone in the world just wants to be okay. I don't think that's a crazy idea to consider that, really, I want to be okay. I want to be able to feel comfortable in my own skin. I want to find that peace. And alcohol brought that to the table at a young age, and I went after that. Fast forward to a bunch of stuff. I'm an adventurous guy. A lot of other things showed up in my life. I'm willing to do whatever anybody offered for the most part. I found that, I ended up in some problems by the time I was 18. The family threw me in like a treatment center, and this was like suburbia Chicago. And that was my first introduction to Alcoholics Anonymous, because people were doing what they suggested. People were carrying a message. They were taking time out of their life. There was a couple of guys, maybe some women, a couple of nights a week that went into this locked youth rehab facility in the suburbs of Chicago, took time out of their life and away from their families to bring us this message of Alcoholics Anonymous, to bring us an example of that you could be sober and happy, to talk about this wonderful program in the 12 steps, and to do a meeting with these kids that were obviously having problems. And to me, that's what, when they start going in this chapter, what they start laying out is here's our history. One guy frantically thinking he's going to drink, picks up a phone, ends up talking to some clergy members. Any drunks? Hey, we got one, and he ends up having a conversation with the guy. The guy says, I'll give him 15 minutes and we're out of there. And 5 hours or something later, these 2 men had come to an understanding. They had found the missing, the main missing component that we had been searching for was the identification. And our history is so amazing. Bill tried to get, for 6 months, Bill tried to get drunks on the streets of New York City sober. He was going to the missions. He was going and grabbing the low-bottom drunks and trying to bring them to, at that point, what was called the Oxford Group. And the Oxford Group is like what predates AA. It's not AA. A lot of our program we take directly from the practices they had, but it was like a Lutheran movement that was dedicated to, the idea was people that were trying to get back to like Christianity before there was a church, to really live a spiritually principled life. It was for people that were deeply religious, and they were going to try to, they called it living maximum or something. Like, are you maximum today? It was like they were trying to help each other to live a deeply spiritual life, And the funny thing was that some people started getting sober as they went to those meetings, and that's where Bill ended up, there's a series of our history, and Bill ends up kind of going to these meetings, and he gets struck sober. And so he kept trying to drag people and tell them, you got to find God. And all these drunks on the street were like, no. And furthermore, the Oxford Group really was about... This is funny. We're going into history land. So I have no idea where this is going to go. It's going to be great. The Oxford Group, and the guy who started was a guy named Frank Buckman. And Frank believed that it was like trickle-down economics. The way you could impact the society the most was to get the people that were the most respected. So they wanted politicians and celebrities, and they wanted people of high importance. So the meetings were these really kind of buttoned-down, well-to-do people. And then you got this failed stockbroker bringing the guy who still smells of his own feces and his throw up to the meeting, and they're looking at him like, dude, get this guy out of here. But something happened in Akron. And what happened in Akron was Bill had some discussions with his doctor, a guy named William Silkworth. And Silkworth had said, well, you need to impress upon an alcoholic the hopelessness of their condition. You're not going to win them over by suggesting they need to find God. If they, you might win them over if they can relate to you. And so Bill was able to sit down with this guy in Akron and do what we do. AA at its core is one alcoholic talking to another. We have all this other stuff. We get to come to conferences. We have groups. We go on picnics and retreats. We have literature. We have pamphlets. At the core, what we're really doing is we sit down, we open up our hearts, and we share our lives with each other. And we get down to, hopefully, the causes and conditions of why, from that little kid, I felt the urge and the compulsion to drink, and it brought me to a point where I was 24 years old. I was living in a perpetual state of brownouts and blackouts, drinking so much that I'd be puking up my stomach acid the next morning because I had nothing left, and found that I had to keep taking a drink every morning because I couldn't live in this world and draw a sober breath. Because if you have what I have, sobriety is insufferable. And that's what I really love listening to Ray Ann, because she really articulated, alcoholism is not a drinking problem. We can get abstinent, but it's a far cry from actually getting sober, in my opinion. I mean, and again, let's not get hung up on the verbiage of that stuff, but I think there's a difference between, if I go to the doctor and they say, hey, you've got cancer, I go, man, that's really bad. Cancer, huh? Stage 3? Okay. But if I never go back and get any treatment for it, I still have stage 3 cancer, probably going to stage 4, And that's what sometimes we get here is, we can find out. I knew at an early age, I knew at 16. I didn't know it because no one talked to me about what's phenomenon of craving. And hey, once you take a drink, if you're alcoholic, you're going to need another drink. And it's going to be a physical compulsion, which is way different than my mind thinking, I should take a drink. It's a little bit different when I'm drinking and what I have is a body that's going, you need more. First time I experienced that, I was visiting my sister at the University of Iowa. I was 16 years old. And I got to stay with her in the dorms. And she knew that I wanted to party. And it was party time. We went down to some dorm room. They had a bar. And I had unfettered access to as much alcohol as I could drink. And all I remember is 10 minutes. I don't remember any. They handed me. All I remember, there was a guy with a cowboy hat named Tex, and they had one a pint glass, and somebody poured a half a pint of bourbon. I don't know what it was in this pint glass, but the pint glass had a description that said beer shot glass, volume 3. And so, bourbon kind of looks like beer. And so I took a sip knowing it was bourbon, and Tex looked over and said, that's a shot glass. I don't want to see any sipping. Which to me meant down the half a pint of bourbon. So I did that, and then it was on to whatever they poured in there next, and I just kept going, and I don't remember anything else. That was the first time I had alcohol poisoning. That was, all I remember is somebody petting my back as I threw up all night and waking up the next day and I couldn't even drink a sip of water. I was really sick. So I experienced craving when I look back at a really early age. But, even at 18 in treatment, I don't have a problem. My problem was that my family was trying to take away what I saw as my solution to life. Alcohol really does treat alcoholism to a point. There's a moment where the problems of trying to get more alcohol and to be living a life where I'm perpetually intoxicated, that you're going to get some drama. I came here with some drama. I was pending, I'd been arrested and was out on some kind of bond from the state of Georgia. They had me for some felony, possession of some outside issue stuff down there. I came here, I was super gluing a plastic front tooth into my face because, my front teeth had been jammed out by some brass knuckles when I was, in my drug dealer phase of my college years. And, the actual, criminals showed up with brass knuckles and a knife. I'm not really a criminal. I mean, I was a criminal, but I'm not a tough guy like that. When these two dudes with ski masks broke into my house, I folded folded right over with the brass knuckles and the knife. But so I had to get my teeth fixed, and then they broke, in a blackout. I came to, and it cracked, and now I had this temporary plastic thing, and I was super gluing that in my face because it kept falling out. I mean, right? So it's like a vision for you, right? Because I think I look a little different tonight, right? And I was talking to Ron. I don't know where Ron is now. I was talking to Ron, who's helping put this whole thing on earlier. we were talking about why you might want to dress up to something like this. And it's like, the man you're seeing tonight is not that person. What this program is ultimately about is it's a program of transformation. This is a program that suggests if you don't change, you're going to die. Because if you have alcoholism, it's a fatal and progressive illness. That this thing is playing for keeps, whether you are playing against it that seriously or not. I mean, could you imagine sitting down at it's like you go to Washington Square Park and there's all the chess tables, if you've ever been to the West Village in New York City. And there'll be some old guy who just looks kind of nondescript, and he's like some grandmaster. And you sit down and you're like, hey, you want to play a game of chess? And he's like, sure. And you move 3 times and it's over. You're like, what? It's like, that guy is really playing the game. You showed up thinking, oh, I'll just have some fun with this dude. You could bring that attitude to alcoholism. Whatever, man. And if you want to do that, that's fine. Dr. Bob wrote that in his story. He said, if you want to go and drink, that's your business. That's fine. If you want to get sober, that's our business. Come in and be with us. If you want to, my buddy Bart said, if you want what I have, maybe do what I do. The only question he asked me was, how free do you want to be? Because you can get all the way free here. And that's what I really get a lot through this Vision for You stuff. So, I brought a lot of fun stuff to AA. I brought 0 religious training, 0 God idea, 0 concept. I mean, I play music for a living still today. That's something that was always there, and I think actually played a little bit of a role in me finding a bottom, was that I really became clear that I was about to let go of this thing I'd been trying to do my whole life. And it was very apparent to me that I was on the precipice of letting go of everything I ever thought I was supposed to do in this earth. And I think that added a little bit of the fuel to the fire, that maybe something had to change. And so I'll just tell you, I came here, I was suicidal. I woke up for a chunk of months asking myself, is today the day I'm going to kill myself? And it's really interesting, and this is also in a Vision for You, where it talks about, this loneliness that we find ourselves in. How many of you guys really know loneliness? I was isolated. I mean, I was. Nobody was inviting me to go anywhere. Everybody was like, "Hey, can you leave?" You ever? Someone called it whiteouts. You ever have those whiteouts where you come to, and people are just looking at you? Sometimes they're angry. Sometimes it's just incredulity. They're like, what were you? And I don't. And all I know is I think I'm holding it together, man. We're just hanging out. It's Friday night. And people are starting to, I'm coming to with these looks and what are you doing? And so I'm in that state. And the book talks about we come to this place called the jumping off place. And we know this loneliness where you wake up and it's it's just me and alcohol. That's what I got to live for right now. And the jumping off place for me was it's me and alcohol's not working. But I can't imagine living a life sober just as much as I can't imagine a life with alcohol. I mean, that to me is really where I got ground down to that, what I would call dust. My experience of sobriety was painful. To me, that's why I'm drinking all the time, because I don't know how to be me. I don't know how to just sit in the world and be comfortable in my own skin. I would watch all these other people in my life that could just figure it out. I mean, how many of us had friends that looked like they were just like us? And then at one day they met her or him, or they got hired at some new career path. They went to some new city. They did all the things that our book talks about we try to do and can't seem to really realize. And I had some friends that were, partying with me along the way. All the stuff I was doing, drinking every day at the middle of the afternoon, first thing in the morning. And then my buddy met her one day and he showed up. We hadn't hung in a couple of weeks and he was all in shape and rode his bike 5 miles across Brooklyn to come and hang. Was super in a great mood. And I was like, what happened to this guy? And I get to I have spent a decent amount of time touring around Europe and the U.S. and Canada and going to Mexico with this man. And he may have a glass of wine once in a couple of weeks today. I don't get it. I don't know how that works. I don't know how you go from he's doing this with me every day, looks like me, and now he's normal. But he seems like he can do that. So that was confusing to me, right? So I have some examples of people that seem like they can just figure it out. So I have this idea that I can just figure it out. And it became very clear to me that I can't just figure it out. And really how that came to be common knowledge was I was 18, I was in treatment, y'all showed up. I was forced into 90 days of sobriety. So anybody else had to do what I call periods of forced abstinence? That's like the law, your family, somebody, there's some paper, there's something where there's an instrument in place that says if you do this, bad things are going to happen. And at that point, at 18, I was like, okay, they're dangling, I'm not going to get to go to this school on the East Coast that I've been accepted to and have a scholarship to pursue my dream if I don't stay sober for this summer at the end of high school. So I did it. And I went to a bunch of meetings, and I was doing steps. There's a club in you were talking about Chicago, this is like Arlington Heights, Illinois. There's a club in Palatine, Illinois called the Palatine Club. And in 2005, you could smoke cigarettes in the Palatine Club. So I went to a bunch of meetings there just to sit around and smoke cigarettes. Like I didn't really want to get sober. I just knew that if I don't jump through this hoop, I don't get to go live the life that I'm supposed to live. And I went to that school. I already told you some of the fun stuff that happened when I went to this really great school in Boston. Came to New York because now I'm in New York and now I got to do the thing and now I don't know how to live. When it starts to matter, I got to actually figure out how to do this life thing. I don't know how to do it. And I've heard it, we talk about, not everybody has the same story. Some of us in here are what I would call the has-beens. And you guys tend to come to AA a little bit older in life, and you were able to build a life, and then systematically through your alcoholism, you tore everything down and let go of everything that had ever happened. And then there's the never was's, which are probably all those happy 22-year-olds in that big book meeting you're talking about. I was effectively a never was. And what that means is, alcoholism showed up in my life at a point where I was never even able to put a life together to burn to the ground. I had the unconditional love of an amazingly stable family that had some resources to try to give me a leg up and do everything they could for me. And I basically did everything I could to dismantle that. I was never able to have a career, show up, do anything. It was all just like I had this opportunity because of the family that I had, the love that they showed me, and I was doing everything I could to destroy it. And waking up suicidal for a while, it struck me that maybe I should go to AA. And I don't know where that came from. I was watching a TV show that actually the guy goes to AA something. I think it was like a Dennis Leary show or something, or he's a firefighter. You guys know what I'm talking about? I don't know. When everyone's asking you to leave, the best thing I had was like Netflix and drink. Like that's it. And so it was like, oh, AA. And I will say in the middle of the college years, I met a happy, sober person. And I think we might have a couple of happy, sober people here. And I would urge you, if you're unhappy and sober, to find the happy, sober people and find out what they did to get happy. Because you can... I came in here middle finger to the world. It's cloudy. It's always, I hate everybody. I've got cooler friends than you. I definitely don't want to hang out with you. Get away from me. Like, that's how I walked in the door. I had this big hair, the super glue, the front tooth thing going. Like, I was, get away from me. But in the middle of this thing in my school, there was this amazing human named Will, and Will's from Hawaii, and he's like a happy, sober guy. And I thought it was just because he was from Hawaii that's why he was so happy. I mean, he literally grew up on a cacao farm. Like he like is a farmer and an amazing musician, and he just he like still runs this farm down in Kauai. If you go down there, there's amazing chocolate down there. So I was like, maybe if I grew up on a cacao farm in Kauai, I'd be happy. But in the middle, and I don't know about y'all, but Will was a vision for me. He gave me a glimpse of what you could get here. And I called him one day because I gotten to know him and I got to realize that he was a genuinely loving person. He wasn't like playing a game. You got to watch people for a little bit. Like, I watched him and he wasn't trying to get something from people. He would look you dead in the eye and he would make you feel like you mattered. You could see when people are really listening to someone, they kind of like, he would turn his attention, his body language, he was there with you. And I got to witness how he lived. And so I called him one time and I talked about what was going on with me. And quietly on the other end of that phone, what I heard was really simple. It was quiet for a moment. And then he said, well, hey, man, I go to AA and it works for me. And that was it. He didn't invite me to a meeting. He didn't talk to me about any literature. He didn't talk about a 12-step program. What he did was he lived this program in front of my eyes. He was the living demonstration of what Alcoholics Anonymous was. He was the embodiment of me looking at what sobriety could be. And all he had to do was say, hey, I go to AA, it works for me. And then that was my idea. That if that's possible, then maybe there's something here. So I'm dying. I end up looking up AA. There's a meeting called the Greenpoint Group, still there. It was 2011, like early June, I want to say, or maybe late May, somewhere on there. And no offense, but I was 24 years old, and I walked into a room, and everybody was like 60 and up. Yeah. And I was like, it was the opposite of being with all the 22-year-olds. I was like, you got to be kidding me. It was like the Grandparents Association of North Brooklyn. They had like off-brand cookies, terrible coffee. I was like, no. Like, I'm here trying to play music for a living, living in Brooklyn. I got to get out of here. And somehow at the end of that meeting, someone was like, there's a men's group coming in a half hour. You should wait. It's going to be a different crowd. And I stayed. And what happened was I got to meet some other people. A lot of young people were there. And I got invited into the fellowship. And if you go to a meeting and you raise your hand and say, I'm new, like, you'll get invited into the fellowship. People will come up to you. If it's going to be weird. You're going to be like, who are these people? And why are they trying to give me their phone number? And like, they're being like, hey man, tomorrow I'm going to be here. We grab a coffee. And I'm like, it was a little overwhelming. But I got invited into the fellowship. And from that first day of early June 2011 or whatever until August 28th of 2011, I really got acquainted with what powerlessness looks like and what alcoholism really is. I learned what having a desire not to drink was, and seeing that every single day the best thinking I could come up with at some point was to take a drink. I'm not, some people, the amazing thing about AA is kind of like Neapolitan ice cream. There's like something for everybody, and we all get our own experience. And to me, that's what's so wonderful. Like, you don't need to have my experience. You need to go get yours and find what speaks to you. And there's different types. It's like there's different flavors for each person. And I think that's super amazing. Where I landed in AA looks nothing like the type of AA I seek out today. But I think it might have been perfect for me. I landed in a group of people that were more fellowship driven. It was going to a bunch of meetings. Nobody was really talking about a big book or doing steps. But what became apparent to me was the best I do is I drink. And I showed up at a meeting on August 28th of 2011, and they offered a burning desire, which I'm conflicted about the burning desire today. But my experience was kind of born out of one. I had the experience of sitting in a meeting for 55 minutes, and it felt like I had a short circuit in my brain. I was going to meetings for like almost 3 months, zero sobriety, like every day, 1 day, 2 days, could not get more than a couple of days sober. And I'd sit in the meetings going like, ooh, I should talk about step 7, here. Like, I've got something to say about something, because that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to share, so let me share. And that day I had nothing. It was blank. And I kind of had one of those out-of-body experiences where my hand went up and the dude called, like, I saw someone point at me, and I almost heard what I shared as if I was in the room listening to somebody else. And what I said, and I'll censor it because we're recording, and y'all nice people are here, but I said, I'm effed and I don't know what to do. But if I'm not surrounded by you people at another one of these meetings, I am going to be drunk and high later. It's going to happen. It's been happening every single night. And it kind of felt like for the first time in my life, I heard the truth about me. We stood up and we closed that meeting with a serenity prayer, and I got that little chill down my spine feeling. I don't know about you. I hope you guys feel that. I hope you get that thing, that you find something in this world that gives you that. To me, that's a big part of how I experience my God. Because every so often, I can get quiet and still, and I can just kind of feel this little chill. And it's like, okay, there's some power here. There's something is going on right here that I don't understand. And the message I felt like I got that day was, this is for you. And AA's been for me ever since. I ended up at 4 meetings that day. That is my first day of sobriety. I cannot claim I quit drinking. I really feel like I was surrendered. I was struck sober. I hear people say things like God is a gentleman. God doesn't go where he's not invited. And I don't know if I was inviting God. I guess I was. But it certainly didn't feel like I was inviting God. It feels like God just showed up one day and just kind of poked me in my heart. So this is for you. The amazing thing about AA is, this can be for you at any moment. No matter where you are in the journey, whether you're here for 2 hours, you've been here for 25 years, you can make a decision to live this way of life at any given moment. And you may have to do that a couple of times in a day. Here's a vision for you. Continue to watch for resentment, selfishness, dishonesty, and fear. When these crop up, right? We talk about all these wonderful promises, like you're going to get all this great stuff, but there's also a lot of promises like, hey, you're a human being. This program allowed me to be able to learn how to live a life and be able to be okay with my imperfections, with my humanness. It's given me an opportunity to find out the things that I tend to do as a reaction to y'all that just don't work for me. I can be incredibly indignant. I've literally the last couple of weeks, the mantra has been like, your pride will be the death of you. Because I really know better. Our book talks about we had no holier than thou attitude. We had no axes to grind. I've had some axes to grind recently. Big time. With AA. With stuff that's going on in AA I just don't agree with. And it's not even I don't agree with. I agree with the problems, but I don't think we're asking the right questions. And that's been the hardest thing for me, where I go, I think we're making nearsighted decisions here. I don't think we're making the big picture stuff. But so this whole chapter and this whole thing, what are we doing here? They talk about the age of miracles is upon us. I am really the recipient of unconditional love of strangers. Throughout my sobriety, there's been people that have shown up that, and I hope you find these people too, they have that light. I remember I met my buddy Bart, and it was like, this guy's just here. He is present. There's that light was in his eye, and it was like I'm just like you, I don't hear voices, but there was, for a week, I said, you should call Bart and ask him this one really specific question around some amends where you stole from people. And I had an amazing sponsor that took me through the steps really quickly. He did the opposite of Stacy. He was like, we're going to do this. It's going to go as quickly as you're willing to do it. Your life is never going to be the same. Are you ready to change your life? Are you ready to have this thing happen to you? And I said, yes. However, when we got to some of the amends, there was stuff I had stolen. And I'd taken money from people, and I had some stuff there, and the direction wasn't go pay the money back. It's a longer story, and it's not worth it. But all I know is I started to try to get people asking me for help, because I really when I got taken through the big book, and it wasn't even through the big book. This might be heretical too, but this guy said, we're going to do the steps. He goes, I'm 28 years sober. I've probably taken over 1,000 people through this process. We can do it as, I've done it in a weekend with people. We're going to do the steps, and then I want you to go read the book afterwards. Because half of what they wrote in there is written from the perspective of the person who's already done this. So half of it's not going to make any sense to you. They're going to be talking about God entering into your heart and all these amazing things happening, and you're stuck in the bondage of you with no clue what's going on. So it's just, you're going to gloss over all that stuff, and you might miss the directions in there as you're glossed over the rest of it. So we're going to take these actions. I'm going to show you in the book where those directions are, and then you can go back and have an experience reading the book on your own, and then we can talk about it. Which for me was super useful. But I met Bart, and as I had started to sponsor people and we were getting through some amends stuff, we were starting to look at 8 and 9, we're reading those pages in the book together, and we're looking at these directions, and, there's a line in there that says no matter what the personal consequences may be, we have to be willing to go and set these matters straight. And I gotta be careful saying this. I have been a forever skeptic, right? I'm like a question authority kind of person. And I love the direction I've been getting in this life. I had this fire for AA, and I was like, people were starting to ask me for help, and I really felt like I was starting to have this experience of trying to build the fellowship I craved. And but as I read our literature, I said, that's not really the direction I got. And I met that guy Bart, and he had that light. And I'd gotten his phone number. It was really random how we met. And a month or 2 months later, it was like, why don't you call Bart and ask him about those amends? And I picked up the phone one day. For a week, I said, I'll do that tomorrow. And I'll just tell you, if for a week you wake up every day and say, I'm going to do that tomorrow, just do it. What I've learned is if I'm going to do it for tomorrow, and I'm going to do it for tomorrow for a week or two, my read on that for me is it's like my ego's last stand. There's probably some growth on the other end of that intuition I've got. If I'm willing to take that action that I keep putting off, there's probably some growth there. And it's kind of like my ego seems to have the job of trying to control my life. So the resistance today I respect is a big part of my alcoholism if it's on the level of taking a spiritual action. So I called this man and we chatted through this stuff, and he said a few things to me. And really what he said was, he literally just kind of quoted some stuff in the book. He read the 9th step to me and the 8th step. We just kind of well, this is how it's read, so pretty clear, right? It's like, who do you think all means? Is that all? Oh, I guess that's all of them. He's like, look, if you stole from them, you're not going to harm them anymore. They just want their stuff back. Those are the easy ones, The deeper, the harder ones are when we get into the emotional stuff, when we start to have to really look at how our actions might have actually wounded people in that way, And so I was talking to this man, and he said a few things that kind of come right out of this. I said, similar to what Rayanne talked about, I was expecting, because I'm familiar with that group that she was talking about. So I'm expecting if I'm going to call this guy my sponsor, there's going to be a list of stuff to do. And I said, well, if I were to call you my sponsor, what would you need me to do? And he laughed. He goes, oh, I don't know. I don't care. Interesting. He asked me 2 simple questions, though. He said, let me ask you a question. Who's responsible for your recovery? And I said, I guess I am. He said, okay. He said, now if I were to give you a consideration, ask you to write a piece of inventory, pray or meditate, sit with something, make an amends, do anything that's literally just our 12 steps, and you're unwilling to take that action, will I be able to be effective in this role? Well, if you ask me to do something and I don't do it, no, I don't think you'd be able to be effective. He said, okay. And then he said this to me. He said, I can't play God in my life, so I'm not going to play God in yours. But I'll make myself available as a resource to you. And I'll open my heart up to you, and I'll open my life up to you, and I'll be available to you as long as you reach out. If I have any personal experience that might benefit something you're going through, I'll share that. But I cannot make decisions on how you should live your life. Because if I were to give you a direction and it went horribly wrong for you, I wouldn't be able to possibly stay sober. And I don't have that power in my life, so I'm not going to exercise it in yours. And he said, if you want, we do this together. We walk shoulder to shoulder. And the only question you have to ask yourself, as I said earlier, is how free do you want to be? And he really showed me what I think this whole thing is about. One drunk talking to another is this really incredible thing. And that's what they talk about. Build the fellowship you crave. So I always try to get through the sponsorship stuff. And if I'm just giving the talk, I feel like I always get to 12 and I got 3 minutes left. But I wanted to talk about some of the things I've gotten to witness, because I believe that's what they set out to do in this chapter. One of the things they said is, we know you might be thinking, so you might be thinking to yourself, I'm jittering alone, and how could I do this? And I'll paraphrase, they say, though you're one man with this book in your hand, but you have just now tapped a source of power greater than yourself. To produce the same kind of results that we have found is only a matter of patience, willingness, and labor. That AA is ultimately about, am I patient enough, willing enough, and if I'm willing to get into the trenches and look for people like me and be willing to offer what was offered to me. I'd met Bart for maybe an hour and a half, and this man picked up a phone and opened up his life to me, and he's become a really dear friend and a close friend for the last almost 9 years now. I've got a standing phone call with a guy that I had met at a weekend thing like this a couple of years before, and I'd heard he had some health stuff, and I heard he was doing a little better, and I got his phone number, and I called him out of the blue, and I said, we met at this weekend. He goes, oh yeah, I remember. And I said, look, I think it might, I don't know, I can hear you. I'm drawn to you, and I feel like it would be really cool if we got a chance to do some work together. Is that something you'd be open to? And Mike's answer was, well, in my experience, God doesn't bring two of his children together just to help one of us. So we've been having a weekly call since November of 2 years ago, 2 Novembers ago. I've had a phone call with this guy for an hour to an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours. We went through the steps, we went through the traditions. He's opened his life up to me. And before that, we were more or less strangers. But that's what this amazing thing is I meet people like Darren who came up. We met randomly. Darren, I don't even know how you got all I know is that the phone rang one day, and the conversation that started happening on that phone was not hanging out in the line at Starbucks, oh, nice weather, huh? I mean, it's there's a level of intimacy that is immediately there if you're open to what this thing is. And that is the fellowship I crave. I hate small talk. I really struggle in large crowds of people outside of AA. When I'm in AA, it's I can deal with, you're my people. I want to talk to you. I want to know about your life. I want to know what's going on. I want to see the triumphs that happen. And another thing that we're going to be guaranteed is life is not going to be 100% on the up and up. It's a cyclical journey we're on. I have this misguided idea that spiritual development is climbing the corporate ladder. I come in down here, 30 years later, I'm here. And it's no, it's this over and over again. That the good times are going to pass just as much as the bad times are going to pass. And I need people in my life that understand that. I need people I can really talk to. I need to let you see me. But I want to talk about some of these stories of some of the stuff that happens. Because I think what really lit a fire for me was hearing those stories of sponsorship. I spoke randomly at a meeting, and it was actually a different fellowship. It was a CMA, if any of those, we had any tweakers in here, you might be familiar with Crystal Meth Anonymous in New York City was actually started. A big part of that was a wonderful lady named Ava. I'm sure you know Ava. And some members of Alcoholics Anonymous kind of helped. And CMA, uses the big book for a lot of stuff. And they had an 11th-step meeting that their group conscience for their 11th-step meeting was that they just want to have people that have really lived in this thing come and talk about their practice of seeking a relationship with the God of their understanding. As long as there's alcoholic, drug addict, they were we're not really as interested in that. We just want to talk about the nuts and bolts of how you practice the 11th step in your journey. And so I said, I can do that. And I met this guy who was in his first month and a half of sobriety. He'd been sober before. And he was angry. He was angry because he had just tried to apply for an apartment, and the last money he had to put for the application fee, and they denied him. So now he was having to move all of his stuff into storage. And he'd been sober before, and he was basically about to go be homeless and didn't know what to do and was really struggling. And we talked, and I got some info, and he called me, I don't know, sometime shortly thereafter he called me, and he said, I really need help. I've done this before. I had 2 or 4 years, I think he had 2 years sober, 4 years sober. I know this program works. I've asked 4 people to sponsor me, and they all said they're too busy. I just need some help. And I got to watch this guy who had to move into his brother's basement in Washington, D.C. He was homeless. He's from London originally. He'd blown through his visa. Was here illegally now. I got to watch that man recover. And I got to watch him go and help other people, specifically in that fellowship. That was part of the deal. I said, you're going to have to go and help people that are just like you. I mean, he also was alcoholic, but I said, you really are having this other thing. So let's do this, and you can go and carry this. So he started sponsoring people in that fellowship. I got to be at City Hall when he got married. In 2016, he was really nervous during the whole election things. He was in an application for a green card. He's like, I don't know what's going to happen. And one day I got a photo from him, and it was his face on a green card. Wow. And then I think it was when we went to Sedona a couple of years back. I landed in the Phoenix airport, and I had, when you're airplane mode, I got all these texts, and it was a photo of him in the U.S. Immigration Office holding a certificate of naturalization. I got to watch a guy who was literally unhoused, had to like move in with family in a basement, couldn't get a job, couldn't do anything, become literally a passport-carrying U.S. citizen. One day at a time, trying to live a spiritual life. I've also watched that man struggle when his younger brother died of cancer, and now he's back like a year. But, we've had it's been an amazing journey with that, and I don't need to get into that. But there was a period of time where I went to this 9 a.m. meeting, and I'm sitting there one day, and I look over, and this is one of my favorites. This dude I've never seen. I'm there every morning. It's almost the same people every morning. And there's this guy with head down, slumped, just crying. And he doesn't look like a guy who would cry. You know what I'm talking about? He's not the crying type. And we end up going to the diner. My buddy Wilson's there. Jeremy Wilson and I are there, and we're talking. And he ordered steak and eggs, and I'm watching him push the steak and the eggs around the plate. And he's like, "I'm too hungover to even eat this. I don't know why I ordered it." And this guy needed help. And he was dying. And we started talking. At some point when we were at the diner, he put the fork down. He looked at me and he goes, "I know what you're doing." I said, "What am I doing?" He goes, "You're 12-stepping me." And I said, "How do you feel about that?" And he goes, "I need it." I was sober at 19. I had a year sober. I got an aunt with 21 years sober. I know this thing works. I was going to break up with my girl, but then she's 3 months pregnant, and she wants to have the kid, and I'm going to be a dad, and I got to figure this out. And it was again, we come here, and the house is on fire. And I got to watch Jeremy. We ended up sitting in a park bench after we hung out for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, taking a third step together. I drove to a Staples, bought him a notebook, said, "Start writing a list of everything that bothers you, everybody that pisses you off, and we'll just keep this going." He was 5th stepping at the end of the month. That man is sober today. It's 6 months of sobriety. His daughter was born. It was on New Year's Eve or New Year's Day. A month later, the mom went nuts. Attacked him while he was holding his daughter, in front of their friend, was threatening to commit suicide. It was a whole thing. She actually got committed to a psych unit. She called the police effectively on herself, went to the bar when they showed up, got wasted, came back wasted. They took her to one of the hospitals, restraining orders, the whole 9 yards. He got painted as the bad guy somehow in all this, with the family had way better money, more money to get lawyers, and he had to surrender custodial ownership of this kid to this mom who was effectively unstable. And he'd call me and he would go, "Man, I think she's going to move and take my daughter. I'm never going to see her again." I don't know about you, but that's way beyond my, that's out of my, I have no experience with any of that. And all I remember hearing one time, I said, "Well, I know a couple of people that grew up not knowing their real biological parents. And most of the ones that I know at some point go looking." And I said, "All I know is that if you live this program and you don't get to see your kid, the day they come looking, they'll come and find a sober dad, and they'll find a sober you, and maybe, just maybe, you'll be able to build a relationship from there." And it was not easy. And I watched him sit with this, and I gotta find out where they're at now. But that was 7 years ago. He's married today to another amazing lady in AA. He's got a stable home. He's got almost full custody of his kid. We come in here and it's I just don't want to die. And I hate everybody. And where's mine? This idea that if you come here and you try to just make it your business to talk about what AA is really about. Our program is contained in the beginning of the 12th step, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. If you're not seeking God, and I don't mean to offend anyone who may have a different concept of God, but to me, this is all about seeking a relationship with a God of your understanding. That is what AA ultimately says. If you're powerless, you need to find power. And it can't be you. And it can't be him or her or the Hummer or the whatever thing or the 5 houses in the yacht. I need to actually get real. And I need to figure out how to find some power. And to me, I think the most impactful, important, and potentially the bigger purpose of all of our lives, if you find yourself in AA and the shoe fits, is perhaps we're all here to go find at least one person just like us and sit across the table. And if you've had an experience where you're looking at your life and you're like, I don't know how I got here. I just showed up and I've been doing what these people have been saying. That's what we got to do. We got to talk about that. Now, we could go down the laundry list. I believe we should know our history. I got a thing from one of our buddies at Texas in here. It's a quote from Bill in 1942 that says, the chief responsibility to the newcomer is an adequate presentation of this program, blah, blah, blah. I think, if you really want to figure out how to be effective, we need to understand what's going on here. And we need to understand, for me, it's about how can I take the experience that I've got of trying to work this program and turn it into the language of the heart. How do I reach somebody? My buddy Russell's illiterate. Russell chose that life of the crust punk, living in all the squats and the leans in the Lower East Side in the 80s and 90s. This guy has woken up more times in a puddle of his own blood and all over New York City than he can count. He's got head trauma. And that guy was sober for 4 or 5 years at one point. We really got to do some stuff. He kind of fell away a little bit. But we talked. It wasn't an academic thing. It was I had to sit with this man and his cane and we talked about our lives, And so I'm a big fan that if you've had an experience here, get involved. I was a little worried because, as I said, I had to do a bunch of 10th stepping before this. And there's just some stuff that's going on in Greater AA. And some of you might be aware of it. There's a conference that's going to happen this April, and there's some stuff on that agenda that I'm concerned about. And I was talking to Mike earlier this week, and where we landed with a lot of that is, in our traditions, in the 6th tradition specifically, we talk about how anything of substance, property, anything of actual value needs to be separately incorporated. So the central offices, the intergroups, the general service office, the publishing companies, all of that stuff is incorporated and it's managed, right? I served on the board, or as a board member on the board of New York Intergroup for a couple of years. I took a service position at our intergroup. I was on the steering committee, then I ended up as a secretary, which meant I was one of the board members. We have trustees of Alcoholics Anonymous, and those people serve voluntarily for 4 or 6 years if you're alcoholic or non-alcoholic. And they might screw this whole thing up. And that's just fine. If all that stuff happens to burn and we happen to have to retool the machine a little bit, maybe that's God doing for us what we can't do for ourselves. The AA that I know is the kindness of y'all. And to me, what I don't think will ever be stopped is the gift that we really got. Through a bunch of people in this story that got woven, the history of AA as we know it, something was at work to allow people like me that had to get evaluated at 8 years old. And then again, at however many times I got evaluated over the years. A real shot at learning how to live life. And the thing that I've been wrestling with the most is I feel a profound responsibility to preserving this gift that I received freely. I really don't want recovery from alcoholism to be confined to a 90 or 100-year window in the 20th century because some of us failed to show up and actually try to preserve it. To me, that's part of when I heard a vision for you. It's I need to make sure this thing 50 or 100 years from now is still here. There is some stat, I don't know if you guys, someone just sent me, there's a poll that alcohol-related deaths have almost, I don't know how many, it's we are way above historical numbers. We are it was from the pandemic to today, shooting up 200%, 300%, something insane. People are going to be born with this thing for forever. And we have a real solution at hand. And Bill talks about it in his story. He says, there's a moment where a lot of us talk about, I got to do the work, and we talk about inventory and amends, and I'm doing the work. And it's yes, if you don't do any of that, as a vision for you states, at the end, you can't transmit something you haven't got, right? So what am I transmitting? Am I transmitting directions, or am I transmitting an awakened spirit? I'd like to try to transmit the awakened spirit part. But I think you have to have an awakened spirit to do that. So all the stuff that I have to do from steps 1 to 11 is going to hopefully get me to that place where I can actually show up and maybe effectively help somebody to find their own experience here, to inspire them to want to do this thing. And in Bill's story, he said, if an alcoholic fails to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he won't be able to survive the certain trials and low spots sure to come. Some words are wrong, don't quote me. Someone's going to come up and be like, no, it was this. But I want to end with this, right? Like, it doesn't say through prayer and meditation, inventory and amends, we're going to perfect and enlarge our spiritual condition. It says through work and self-sacrifice for others. That's the thing that can't ever be taken away. That's what AA is. It's us loving each other. It's us, stop defending yourself. Let us in. If you're here, we want to help. Accept that help if you can. And then go and be open to help other people. To me, that's the vision for you. The person who came to AA and had an experience with all this stuff, who's hopefully like me, sitting there some days going, I don't know how I got here. I mean, I legitimately get to travel all over the world. I get to play music for a living. I get to play on Broadway for a couple of things. Like, it's insane. I don't have a lot of money. Let's not get it twisted. No. We are poor, y'all. That's not guaranteed. You're not guaranteed. I hate when people, my cash and prizes. That's nowhere in there are we guaranteed cash and prizes, right? But we're guaranteed serenity and peace. And that our fears will slip away from us. And that we'll be able to have a sanity return. And what sanity for an alcoholic means is I'll be able to look at alcohol and understand that if I drink it, it'll kill me. The insanity of my alcoholism is when the best idea I get is take a drink. That's the most insane thing an alcoholic ever does, and that comes when we're sober. And you can recover from that. And my buddy Mickey says, you can recover from the way you feel. But you got to be willing to open your heart and talk about where it hurts. Because the longer we're here, at least I'll speak for me. I remember talking to my friend Judy a couple of years ago, and I said, Judy, I'm doing everything. We're sponsoring an army. I got the commitments. We're doing all the stuff, prayer, meditation, inventory. It's happening. And I feel broken. Has that ever happened to you? And she said, I think we feel broken because we are. It's okay to be broken. This isn't about perfection. This is about, am I willing to wake up a day at a time, practice living a principled life, and get busy trying to think about how I might be able to help somebody else. And I guarantee you, I had a vision of what God might be, and I kind of came to like the housekeeping at a hotel. You ever in the room when they knock, like, housekeeping? You're like, no, we're in here. Like, okay, we'll come back later. Fine. And then you leave the room, right? And then what happens? You come back a few hours later, and it's like the bed's made, fresh towels, there's like a mint on the pillow, and you're like, oh, cool. Put back in order. And I kind of feel like that's how God works with me. If I'm home and I'm tinkering in my life, God's going to be like, hey, you want some help? And I'm like, oh, I'm here, man. I got it. But when I'm on a phone call with y'all, or I'm sitting down and I'm thinking about how can I be useful to this person and can I help you, I think that's when God gets to go in and fix me. And through that sponsorship stuff, all the stuff that I had guilt and shame and remorse and regret about, those stories showed up with a different person at a different time. And it gave me an understanding of perhaps why my life went how it went. And I got to see, as our book talks about, that I don't need to regret my past. That my past and my brokenness and my darkness and my humanness into sobriety, all the messes that we make, all that stuff is what seems to be the glue that might allow someone to come in the door and stick here with us. So I thank you all for my life. I hope this made somewhat of sense. I had a lot of fun. I'm feeling it, I'm feeling that. I'm really excited for tomorrow. Some people I really love dearly are going to be up here, and we're going to get to go through these steps and hear from all them. And I'm just, I want to thank you for my life and thank you for your attention.